It's the TMZ Behind the Bar podcast with the TMZ lawyers, Jason Beckerman and Derek Kaufman.
This week, a federal court in New Jersey ordered the world's most famous poker player, right? Nobody comes close to Phil Ivey.
Phil Ivey is at the top. He's on the Mount Rushmore, at least.
Yeah,
with
that's
Phil
right.
Hellmuth, maybe.
So the world's most famous poker player, Phil Ivey, to repay about $10 million to a New Jersey casino because the court found that Ivey and a confidant by the name of Chung Yin Soon, is it Soon or Sun?
I'd go Sun.
Sun?
I don't know.
Okay. Had engaged in something called edge sorting, and we'll get into what that is. But basically, it gave Ivey and his confidant Sun an unfair advantage in a game of baccarat. The story is created.
Baccarat's the famous Bond game, right?
James Bond's game.
That's
That's
what he
right.
always played. Yes, high stakes.
The story has created an absolute furor in the gambling world, and before people poo-poo that too quickly, the gambling world is up to a $1 trillion worldwide enterprise. And Ivey, I think, is the most famous gambler in the world, not just because Ivey is so big and such an enormous star, often called the Tiger Woods of poker.
Why'd you pick Tiger Woods?
I didn't pick Tiger Woods.
Oh, that's
Actually,
what he's
Phil
called.
Ivey did. He also happens to be the only prominent African American in the poker circuit, as far as I know.
I think that's right, yeah.
But he coined himself that, so I think I can quote him without you declaring me a racist jerk. But also because it seems that most card players that I've seen out there don't even seem to think there's much, if anything, wrong with what Phil Ivey did. And so that's the story of this week's Behind the Bar podcast. I'm Jason Beckerman.
And I'm Derek Kaufman.
Derek, a little background on this. First of all,
This is complicated stuff. This is a sophisticated strategy, so you're going to have to break it down for us
but
how
we're
he
gonna,
achieved
We're
this.
going to try and make it as easy as possible. Ivey and Sun were playing a game called Baccarat. Baccarat, yes, James Bond's most, famous for most of all for James Bond being.
You would always
an
play it
aficionado.
against the villain, yeah.
That's right. But just really, really simple. It's a game. Two things you need to know. Number one, it's a game where each player plays individually against the dealer. There may be but much like blackjack, there's 5 or 6 players at the table. You can get an indication of what the cards are by looking at your competitor at the other player's cards. But your only competitor is the dealer. If you beat the dealer, you win. If you lose to the dealer, you lose.
It's the game in those quiet rooms in a casino, too.
Yeah.
It's not on the floor. It's a little bit out of the hustle bustle. It always
Right.
seems like a more sophisticated game to people.
That's right. And in addition to James Bond, it's actually a game that was developed really in Asia. It's largely played by Asian players in a casino. Each baccarat, so every game ends either in a tie, the player winning, or the dealer winning, the banker winning. And most important for our story, the most important cards, the cards you really want, are those between 6 and 9. You want to avoid face cards.
Yeah, because you add up the cards in some way to win a game of baccarat, and face cards are too heavy of cards.
That's right.
Too rich.
So that's the general story of baccarat. Just keep that in mind. You want 6s and 9s, you don't want face cards, and you're playing directly against the dealer. That's really all we need to know for our purposes. The allegations in this case against Phil Ivey, which he really doesn't dispute, right? What he disputes is that there's anything wrong with it, but he
Correct.
doesn't dispute the conduct necessarily.
Yeah, kind of what happened is all on the table, kind of factual.
So that Ivey and Sun, Sun actually really noticed. So what happens when a deck of cards is taken out of circulation in a casino is not just thrown in the trash. Typically, they're marked, often with a hole through the entire deck of cards, and they're sold in the souvenir shop of the cards. So Sun went and bought these cards, and she noticed an irregularity on the back of the cards being used at the Borgata Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. She noticed that the edges on the cards, the back of the cards, so you're not looking at the face, you're looking at the back of the card, the edges on the cards were narrower for cards that were numbered than they were for cards that were face cards. So she could tell by training herself within 1/32nd of an inch the width of the edge of the card, and by doing that could identify which cards were 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s, and which cards were face cards, and thereby dictate what cards you wanted to take, because you have options in baccarat, much like blackjack,
Right.
whether to take another card, and that will be dictated by whether you win or lose is dictated by what that card is.
Got it.
So by knowing what the card was, she could manipulate the odds of victory.
Right, they call this edge sorting, right? So the back of the card has that design, but there's a white frame.
Right.
And the white frame is slightly different. That's what's different, not the pattern on the back
That's
of the
right.
card.
Though just the white frame. And the facts are a little complicated, and we couldn't really get an exact telling of what exactly happened from the lawsuit, but from the court's order.
Sure.
But nevertheless, it appears that that
they teamed up.
They teamed up, and she would ask the dealer in Mandarin, because most of the dealers at baccarat games speak Mandarin. She would ask the dealers in Mandarin to rotate a card while its face was down, rotate a card as some sort of an indication to Ivey, hey, this is a card you either want or don't want, whatever.
A signaling mechanism.
signaling
So they didn't have to talk across the table, hey, that's a 10 because I know its edge is wider. They would do a signal.
That's right.
And they devised this and mastered the game, right? They won a ton of money.
They won up to about $9.6 million
in 4 trips.
In 4 trips to the casino.
Unfathomable.
Which seems to me, if you're trying to conceal something you're doing from the casino, maybe you want to win a little less money.
You know, there's a famous expression in the law that we use a lot, which is dogs are happy, cats are happy, pigs get slaughtered.
Right.
And what it means is a little bit of cheating, a little bit of extra food for the dog is all fine, but when you get piggish, when you start to get greedy, then you get
So
caught.
you used a really interesting word there, a loaded term called cheating. But here's really why Ivey and Son felt that they really didn't have to slow their roll, because they don't think there's anything wrong with cheating. What they say
they don't think there's anything wrong with what they did.
Right, with what? Sorry.
Which they wouldn't
they
term
do
it
think
cheating.
there is something wrong with cheating.
Right.
But they say what we were doing is just an advantage play technique.
Yeah.
Basically, we are better than the average person is. We noticed a defect that the house had created. We hadn't done anything.
We didn't bring our own cards. These are your cards.
These are your cards. We just simply noticed that you could tell from the back of the card which were the good cards and which were the bad cards. That's on you, not on us. And if we're smart enough to notice that, then we should, by all accounts, take advantage of that and win. Certainly, the casino has its advantages built into the game. Why shouldn't we seek every advantage we can within the letter of the law?
And Son had a visual the visual acuity required to do edge sorting is an insane talent, right? I mean, these are tiny fractions of an inch, and she used it, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, to flip the advantage to the player. Now, every house game, the reason casinos are built is because there's, to varying extents, a house advantage. Sometimes it's close. In craps and blackjack, it's about 51%, let's call it.
Right.
In other games, it's much worse, like roulette, where the house has a much more decided advantage. Here, they just flipped it a little bit so that over the long haul, when you play these games, and if you bet heavier when the odds are in your favor, you can take the house.
Right. Right.
And that's all they did.
And I was just reading we have in front of us here, Derek and I have been reading through the actual court's order, excerpts from the court's order in which he ruled against Ivey and Son in this case and ordered them to pay the nearly $10 million back to the casino. He remarks upon Son's incredible gift, her real talent. This is not something that anybody could do through enough study. Again, she was recognizing cards different from one another within 1/32nd of an inch that she was looking. She's not holding this card up to her face. She's looking at it on a flat surface some feet from her face and recognizing the distinction between these cards. Really
and what
remarkable.
law would you say she broke? Because did they defraud the casino? Are there casino laws that they cheated? How did the judge sort of do that if they're just playing the game as it plays and looking at the cards?
So Derek's teeing this very important issue up here, which there is cheating. We're going to talk about that in a second. There's lots of ways that casino players and casinos too.
Sure.
I don't know if you looked at those as well. Casinos cheat as well by rigging the system, by bringing in different techniques and different apparatuses, marking cards. This is cheating, right? What the court said is there's no law that they broke. They didn't cheat. But what they did was they breached the contract they had with the casino. His argument is that every time you walk into a casino, there are house rules at play. And by sitting down at a table, you are adopting those house rules, which seems a little fishy as a contractual sort of obligation.
Is there a meeting of the minds? But I think there's something to this because when you walk into a casino, you know when you take your trip to Vegas that the house wins. The house has the advantage, and you can go in there, play the games, and occasionally, because the advantage is maybe small, maybe 51%, you can win.
Yeah.
But the rules of the game are that the house has the advantage, and you are at a disadvantage, and then it's just gambling at that point.
But
didn't they breach that?
I guess so, but if there's a legal mechanism in place where you can squeeze those odds, so it's not 52 or 53% in the house's favor, it's 51 or 50%, 50.1% in the house's favor, that's good. Well, I get your point, though. Once you flip that over so that you now have the advantage over the house because you're employing some sort of a mechanism.
You've breached that contract in some sense.
That contract. That was the argument of the court. I do find it fishy, though, because if you were to say to me as you walk in, do you accept that the house has the odds in your favor? I suppose I would accept that because I know that it's true.
Yes.
But if I had an otherwise legal means of flipping that, I'm just smarter than other people are. I can read.
You outsmarted the system.
I outsmarted them. I was able to, we'll get into card counting in a second. I'm able to sort of keep in mind what cards have come out before and therefore put the odds in my favor. I think that that's okay, but I guess not.
I do too. This is really, really slippery stuff. I'm being a little bit facile in the way that I describe it, but there is a sense that you walk into a casino and it's almost like I think of it like a click wrap agreement, right? Like all those things you hit, I agree on. You sort of agree that the house's advantage and you hope for the best. You hope your 49% chance of winning comes through for you. Okay? Card counting is similar to me. It's also advantage play, and there's obviously a lot more written about card counting than there is edge play.
There's been movies made about card counting, books written about card counting.
Yeah, actually, Jason, Bringing Down the House is a very famous book on the subject, and I think we got the author on the line.
We do. Ben Mezrich, most famous, I think, for his book Bringing Down the House, the inside story of 6 MIT students who took Vegas for millions. It was about the group of MIT students who developed the card counting systems, squeezing millions of dollars from casinos in Vegas and elsewhere. Yeah. Later made into the movie 21 with Kevin Spacey, Lawrence Fishburne.
You know I love a good story where a bunch of nerds get rich.
I know.
This is like this saying to me. Yes.
That's right. So Ben, have you heard about this Phil Ivey situation? He's now been ordered by a court in New Jersey to pay $10 million back to the casino.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following it on and off, and I'm familiar with him and what he's done and about the case itself. And yeah, it's crazy. I'm always into the sort of when people figure out a way to beat the casinos. I'm a big fan of that. So
yeah, I bet you've made a good livelihood out of it.
So I take it you have some sympathy for Phil.
I have a lot of sympathy. Listen, back when I did Bring It Down the House, the whole idea was that the casinos don't want you to use your brain in a casino. And even though you're not breaking any laws, they try and find ways to kick you out, throw you out, if you have any sort of advantage at all. Which is absurd. They want it to be set up so that only they can win over time. And if anyone kind of figures out a way to win, they're not wanted. And they don't put that on any posters. When you show up in Vegas, you don't know that there's an expected loss. Nobody tells you that you're expected to lose a certain amount of money. And I used to interview casino supervisors and say, well, why is this fair? And they would use the movie theater analogy, which is that if you go to a movie theater, you pay a fee to watch the movie. When you go to Vegas, for instance, you have an expected loss, and that's the fee. And the MIT blackjack team didn't pay a fee. And that's the idea behind the Phil Ivey thing, is that, he had an expected loss, and he sat down at the table and did not have, any expected loss. And so he wasn't paying his fee. And it's ridiculous. I mean, to me, it's completely absurd.
Well, let me push back on that just a little bit. So Phil Ivey and the MIT guys went in as a team. And isn't one of the sort of ground rules of playing a game like baccarat or blackjack that you go in there and the house has its 51% advantage or whatever it is, and you can win because you got the other 49%, but the odds are the house is going to win over the long haul. So do you think it's still kosher when you have a team signaling mechanisms and the like deploying these systems?
My understanding is that as long as you're not employing any devices, a calculator or there were people who would bring a Geiger counter in and they would put radioactive isotopes on the cards. Things like that are clearly against the rules and should be illegal. But if you're not using any devices, I don't see why, you're not showing your cards to your friends. You're not signaling what cards you have. It's not that kind of a team play. I don't see why. I would understand it, for instance, if you're playing poker and you're signaling your buddies what cards you have to change, their play. But this is very different. This is a game where, you're not doing things like that. You're not using anything that is not available to everyone. You figured something out. And I think it's up to the casino to figure out a way so that you can't do that if that's what they want to do. But I don't, I don't agree. I don't agree that just because it's a team that it's breaking any sort of cardinal rules.
I'm new to this entire line of thought here and the entire systems that are being used, but I think that I agree with you in that when I walk into a movie theater, I certainly know what I'm getting myself into. But I like to go to casinos. I've gone to Vegas my entire adult life, and I've played quite a bit. I understand that the reality is that they have an advantage over me, but I don't have an expectation that I can't defeat that advantage or at least limit that advantage through my own intelligence. And frankly, I think I'm a better blackjack player than most other people are. And I exploit that advantage to the extent possible. And I would never sort of suggest that somebody else who's smarter than me and spends more time on it can't even push that even further.
Sure, but the very reason these edifices exist, right, that you have casinos are because the house has a distinct advantage. And if their game is played over many, many rounds, they win. And that's why they build these gigantic casinos where you can ride roller coasters inside and so forth. And I think there is something to what the judge is saying, that that's an implied contract that you walk in, and if you are lucky enough to win the 49% of the time, great, and you had a good day.
Yeah.
But over the long haul, the casino's got to win. That's why they exist.
But that's not how they position themselves. I mean, if you walk into a casino, they want you to believe you can win. All of their advertising, everything about a casino is about, come in, you could win. You could be that guy who wins. They don't advertise, don't worry, you're going to lose. Come on in, you're going to lose 49% of the time. They say the different. It's almost the exact opposite contract. You walk in thinking that you have a shot to win. And the reality is, over time, you don't, unless you're Phil Ivey. So I think that, I don't agree with the fact. I really feel like, listen, when they figure these things out, they should find a way to beat Phil Ivey at their game. But if he's figured something out and he's not using a device and he's not, manipulating the cards by touching them or anything like that, I think it's all kosher.
So what's next here? We know about edge sorting and we know about counting cards, right? And these casinos, and Derek and I talked earlier about what casinos are doing to combat these attacks. What's the next?
What's the next
thing?
Vanguard of cheating?
Yeah.
That's advantage play, we like to call it.
Advantage play, exactly.
I think it's a great question. I think people will always figure something out. Mistakes with the cards, or the fact that what he was doing is something that shouldn't exist. I mean, there's no reason why a casino should have had this hole open for him to take advantage of. But there are always advantages. There are always things that people figure out, advanced techniques. There were advanced techniques like shuffle tracking, which is something, you can track a group of cards through a dealer's shuffle and know where they're going to be. There's cutting to aces, which is a technique of getting an ace to come out to you. There are a lot of different advantages that are just very difficult to do. But who knows? You never know what's next. I think there are always really smart people trying to figure it out.
It's interesting you said, though, that he took advantage of a flaw in their deck, the patterns on the back or the narrowness of the white. That's different than what the MIT kids did, which I had a lot more respect for, because the flaw in what they did is intrinsic to the game itself. You could design a perfect deck of cards that you can't edge sort. Yeah. Conceivably, you can't design your way around card counting. You can, I guess, add more decks, which is what they've tried to do. They've tried to speed deals so you can't mentally do the counting, but it's intrinsic to the game. There's always going to be a Rain Man out there who can count cards.
Right, and there is definitely a difference between using math to beat a game and using the fact that the cards are misprinted. Absolutely, 100%. And I see the difference there. I don't think either one of them should be illegal. But I do agree that there's a big difference.
So, Ben, just to do a complete left turn here, I understand that you recently released a book called The 37th Parallel about UFOs and did a TED Talk on it. Derek and I are ultimate skeptics. Why should we be interested in a book about UFOs?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's interesting. I was a skeptic going into it as well. But the reality is there's a lot more data and information to the whole idea of visitation than you would believe. And listen, I come from a science family, but what I really discovered is that the impediments to believing in UFOs have fallen. The idea that there isn't life on other planets pretty much is, everyone accepts now that there's probably life on other planets. And the idea that they're too far away is no longer scientifically true. With current technology, we could get a probe to the closest Earth-like planet in about 40 years. So that's what drew me into it. It's a story about a sheriff in Colorado who was looking into a cattle mutilation, and he got caught up into this weird world of UFOs and essentially became a believer. But it's a wild story. So
this is not the stuff of chupacabras and Bigfoot and Loch Ness. This has more grounding.
It's really all about Roswell. It is about that kind of weirdness, but it is more about what is going on. There's a private company, it turns out, that has been involved in UFO research in combination with NASA and the FAA for about 25 years. Something completely unknown to anybody, but it's really wild. And when you get into it, you're really going down a rabbit hole. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that it's not as crazy as you would think.
I really dislike it when I'm completely certain about something and then somebody comes along and disrupts my certainty.
That's my goal, is at least to just open that little bit window, thinking, you know what, it's not as crazy. And certainly there are a lot of crazy people in that world. But when you start to sort of dig into it, there are some odd conspiracies involving the Air Force that you just can't get around.
Well, I love it. I feel like you took down casinos, and now the logical next target is the U.S. government and its vast cover-up of the alien conspiracy.
I've had fun with this story, and I never expected to write about this kind of thing. And I remain mostly skeptical about most areas in it, but I do think that there's no reason why people shouldn't look into it. And as of right now, you can't really look into UFOs without there's being a mocking component to it. Right. The fact, the idea. But now you can look into life on other planets. Funnily, 50 years ago, if you had said there's life on other planets, everyone would think you were crazy. Right. Now, of course, we accept that. Right. So the next step is to accept the idea that maybe they've been here. And I think we're getting closer to that.
Well, when we find them, will you come back on?
I will be back. Absolutely. I'd love to.
You'd be in demand. You would be in demand, so we're going to hold you to that.
Come hit Vegas together, and it'll be awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Ben Mezrich, thanks so much again, the author of The 37th Parallel and Bringing Down the House, the OG of Ben Mezrich books, Bringing Down the House.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Well, that was great, and we've talked a lot about advantage play, card counting, edge sorting. Let's move over to cheating. Actual cheating.
Yeah. That nobody disagrees with is cheating.
Objective cheating.
Right.
So the cheating mechanisms, you mentioned you looked into the casino cheating, which is also illegal. Anyone cheating the rules of the game, whether it's the player or the house, there are laws against this. The casino can't cheat either.
And let me just sort of buttress that up a little bit. I spent a lot of time researching gambling laws for various reasons, and one of the things
just as a side hobby.
Yeah, just a side hobby. It's not just the legislative regimes, the legislature of Nevada or New Jersey who passes these laws that restrict gambling. They also appoint these gambling control boards in both states, and you hear a lot about it in the boxing regime. There's a commission to oversee it, and they have tremendous legislative power that's been delegated to them, and all they really have to do is write something down and get everybody to approve it, and it can happen very, very quickly. So these gambling control boards are very adept at sort of addressing issues as they arise, much more so than your typical sort of regulations that would have to go through a legislature, a Congress, be signed off by a government. They're very nimble and very adept at handling
the movie Casino.
Like the movie Casino.
The guy comes in, he talks to De Niro, he says, look, this can go easy or hard. You can hire my no-good son.
It's a great point you just made, that it also lends itself to corruption. And I think that has largely been rooted out, but it lends itself to corruption because it's not a legislature that is open to public scrutiny. It is a bunch of dudes, used to be dudes, right, in a closed room who are signing off on things. And it's the kind of thing that a lot of money can really influence. It obviously happens at the legislative level too, we see it. But at these gambling control boards, these things will forever corrupted by mafia money and the like.
It's a powerful position to have, and kickbacks. It's a money operation. That's what casinos are. Right. So you expect there to be some graft.
That's right.
But so
let's talk about cheating.
Let's talk about cheating. So I focused on player cheating, which I find fascinating. There's obviously movies, and there's Nevada cheating's punishable by 1 to 6 years in prison and a $10K fine. It's a serious offense. Just for cheating the casino.
$10K fine seems so small compared to 1 to 6 years in prison. I mean, who's complaining about the $10K fine at that point?
It's true, and presumably you've taken a lot of money. There's also restitution. You have to pay the money back. The fine would be on top of that. But 6 years is stiff, though. I mean, this is a serious prison sentence for some loaded dice.
But it's a felony as well, so you're going to do real time in prison, not just in your county jail.
And if you're the guy who has the loaded dice and you're against hardened criminals, good luck. Good luck. If you're the guy who learned how to make a dice roll 7. Okay, so there's a lot of mechanisms, but what the uniting thread is that you're not gaining an advantage based on the house's play. You are cheating. You're using some sort of device. You are loading up the cards in some way. So this is fundamentally different. Some of the common ones are, a false shuffle. The Tran organization used a false shuffle to bilk $7 million in baccarat and blackjack winnings from U.S. casinos. And this is basically where you need the dealer's cooperation. You're in cahoots with the dealer. They seem to be shuffling the cards, but they don't shuffle them, or they shuffle them in a way that leaves one card visible, and it gives you an advantage. And there's huge gambling rings. So that was popular. There's something that's called roulette past posting, where when the roulette ball spins, as it hits into its number,
you distract
and move your chips over to that number, or throw some numbers on that. I thought that was fascinating because it's actually quite common. You distract the spinner of the roulette
or you get him
wheel,
or he's in cahoots.
Or you get him in cahoots and you split with them.
Right.
Wild to me. There's hidden cameras, which are very obvious. There's card switching, where you put a card up your sleeve, sort of a magic trick type thing. Slot machine bill validating. You don't think of slot machines, but they used to stick. They would hit a mechanism that was the bill reader, and whatever bill it was actually would be read as a $100 bill. So you could put in a single, hit this switch, and it would read it as 100. So you use it to play. There's whole card reading, where the dealer lifts up their card. There's a dice slide. I love this. If you're really good at craps, rather than a loaded dice that kind of like flips or has some mechanism in it, you roll one dice so it bounces, and you can learn to roll in a way that the other one just slides.
Oh,
and you can distract them because they ask to see the dice tumble. It's called a dice roll, obviously. But if you
so
slide
if one dice you fix it a 6, then you can bet only high numbers, and you can really increase your odds tremendously.
How genius is that, too? Because one's rolling, so you're like, hey, I rolled the dice.
Yeah.
But you can have one slide. I thought that was fascinating. If you didn't pick that up, I think you deserve whatever winnings you get.
Oh, really?
It's just my personal feeling. There's roulette color up, where you go and buy chips that are similar color and then trade them in for more money. There's card marking, which is like dog-earing the cards.
Yeah.
That's very, very old school. And then those are like the big cheating methods. I thought they're fascinating.
What should we employ, and what should we advise our listeners to employ? What do you think? I like the dice slide.
I love the dice slide. But you know what? With all of these, I think even though Vegas is now corporate, you still get your thumbs broken. I think they still have back rooms where, like in the movie Casino, they put your head in a vice and they just start turning.
Yeah.
I would worry so much about that it seems short money.
Yeah, I got to tell you, though, the pain that you suffer from going to federal prison seems to be even
You'd
more
rather be in the vice
terrifying. I'd rather have my
your eye
eyeball
pops out?
taken out in the vice than go and shower in federal prison.
Well, I've learned something about you. So tell me, do you know anything about the house cheating the players? Because I don't know much about that. That's fascinating to me.
I read a little bit about it. There's a number of ways. I mean, it's typically with mechanical rigs. Rigging a roulette wheel is an easy one. You can unbalance a roulette wheel so you know which side of the wheel you're typically going to end up on. You just unbalance it by a percentage point or two, a degree or two of tilt, and so you can figure out which side it's going to go to.
And it'll land more on the zeros and the double zeros where the house wins, maybe?
Or even, I guess that's
Things
right.
like that,
I mean, well, although the zero and double zero are on opposite sides. But anyway, you rig the roulette wheel in one form or another to sort of push it to numbers that the players don't play. And there's also, the groups of numbers that we know players play more often. So it's not just the zeros and double zeros that will increase the house's odds. You can force it to other
You would
numbers.
think if it's not perfectly balanced, though, and a player learned that, they could flip it to their advantage, that it would be weighted, and they would put their bets in that quadrant or that half. Yeah.
So there's rigged video poker machines. There's loaded dice that the players don't know about. So you can load them towards sevens, which is typically crap out, and that's the house advantage. False shuffles of cards, the same sort of things that the player can take advantage of if they're in cahoots with the dealer or somebody manipulating the roulette wheel. The casino itself can take advantage of. And from what I've seen, this is a very common thing. And what gives the gambling control boards in Nevada fits are you have these outlying casinos. You're not going to have it at Bellagio and places like that. You're going to have it at the smaller casinos where margins are tighter, and they really do need to take advantage of, they might need to take advantage of people just to make ends meet. And so you see it there, and it's harder for the gambling control boards to regulate, and it might be easier to take advantage of
But the club that the commission, I would think, wields is you'll lose your license.
Oh,
and without your
absolutely.
license, you're out of business. You can't have gamblers in there. It's very hard to keep that gambling
It's broken
license.
thumbs, it's showering with the other federal convicts, and it's losing your gambling license.
I agree. It sounds like a horrific nightmare.
Yeah, just play the game straight.
Yeah. On that note, happy holidays to everyone. Keep your thumbs intact.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Are we supposed to say Happy Kwanzaa? I'm unclear about
I don't know.
this.
Kwanzaa was invented by a Stanford professor in like the 70s.
Yeah.
I know it's a holiday, but wasn't it an invention of a professor?
But you know what?
That
If you
relates to
celebrate
an older
Kwanzaa,
holiday?
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy to that.
Happy New Year. And
I apparently light my Hanukkah candles in the wrong order. Gary informed me. I posted a video of my daughter lighting her first Hanukkah candle. He told me it's supposed to be right to left like you read Hebrew.
tell him your Instagram photo was flipped.
Okay,
So
deal.
All right, bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you want more nerdy deep dives into the legal side of celebrity news, hit our subscribe button right here.
And check out our previous episode over here.